Listen, K-fam. She texted, "Come over. I ordered pizza," to a man who owns the building she lives in. Wrong number, IU, the wrongest number in Manhattan. Naomi Bennett, 28, Black American woman, archival conservator on the overnight shift at a private Korean American art foundation, 4 levels underground, no windows, no cameras, one witness. Her, 4:40 in the morning, hands inside an 1890s scroll. The executive director walks a stranger into her lab and calls her the night girl. The stranger puts his thumb on 130-year-old paper and creases it. Then he tells her to fix it. Naomi doesn't yell, she photographs it. 19 floors up, in a penthouse lit only by security monitors, a phone lights up with her pizza text. Seo Tae-hyun, 34. They call him the quiet one. 6'4", midnight charcoal shirt, sleeves folded back over old scars and black ink tattoos. A koi carp climbing the left side of his neck into his collar. 9 minutes later, he's leaning on her doorframe. One open box. "You got the wrong number, neighbor. But since you invited me to dinner, it'd be rude to let you eat alone." She's barefoot in a sapphire robe with $88,000 in loans and 11 weeks before she's homeless. He offers her no money. That's the only reason she doesn't throw him out. Then she says the consultant's name, and his chewing stops for exactly 1 second. Omo, 1 second. K-fam, that second is the whole story. But what she found 6 weeks later, in a photograph she'd already taken. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a member and help our channel. Naomi Bennett had her hands inside an 1890s scroll when the elevator woke up. Nobody rode that elevator at 4:40 in the morning. Nobody. The basement of the Kang Whitmore Foundation had one working freight car, and it groaned like an old man getting off a couch. And Naomi knew its sound the way you know a roommate's footsteps. It was moving. It was coming down. She set the bone folder on the mat. Slow. Everything in that room was slow, because everything in that room was 200 grams of mulberry paper worth more than her entire life. The lab had no windows. 4th level down, sealed. 68 degrees, 45% humidity, and a hum from the air handler that had lived in her skull for 3 years. She worked overnight because paper doesn't care what time it is, and because the day people didn't want to. On the table in front of her, a hanging scroll, ink on paper, Joseon Revival, brought over in 1912, cracked along the top mount where 130 years of hanging had pulled the fibers apart like a slow argument. She'd been repairing that crack for 6 hours. Wheat starch paste, cooked at midnight. Kozo tissue torn, not cut. Torn, so the fibers would feather into the original, instead of sitting on top of it like a sticker. 19 strips, each one the width of a thread, each one placed with a brush that had maybe 40 hairs in it. The elevator hit the bottom, the doors dragged open. Naomi stood up. Carol Brennan came out first, and Carol Brennan at 4:40 a.m. was already in the cream knit suit, already blown out, already holding her phone like it was a 5th finger. The pearls sat on her collarbone. 58 years old and moving like she had a car double parked. Behind her, a man Naomi had never seen. Navy suit, half a size tight through the shoulders. No tie. Collar open on a throat with a shaving rash going up the side of it, raw, pink, the kind you get from a bad razor, and no patience. Ash blonde hair combed straight back off a long face. Suede loafers, no socks. In a basement lab, burgundy portfolio under one arm. "There she is," Carol said. Not to Naomi. About Naomi. "This is the night girl." Naomi's hand stayed on the edge of the table. 3 years. 3 years of arriving at 9 p.m. and leaving at 6 a.m., of cooking paste on a hot plate, of pulling a scroll back from the dead one thread at a time, and the executive director of the foundation walked a stranger into her lab and introduced her as a shift. "Naomi Bennett," Naomi said. "Conservator." Carol was already looking past her at the table. "Dennis Kovalik, acquisitions consultant. He's helping us restructure." Restructure. 12 years in this business teaches you that word. Restructure means somebody's already made the decision and you're getting told in a hallway. Kovalik didn't shake her hand. He walked to the table. "This is the Cheon scroll?" His voice was flat, pleasant, like a man reading a menu. "That's the accession number, yes." "Huh." He leaned over it, over the open mat, over the 19 strips of tissue that had taken her 6 hours and hadn't dried yet. "Sir." Naomi moved, 1 step. "The paste is still wet. Please don't lean over the..." He put his thumb on it, not near it, on it, right on the top mount, right where the crack lived. And he ran his thumb down the paper like a man testing a shirt on a rack, and the sound it made was nothing at all, and that was the worst part. Paper that old doesn't scream. It just changes forever, silently, and then it's a different object than it was 1 second ago. Naomi's whole body went still. A ridge came up under his thumb, a crease. Diagonal, about 4 centimeters, straight through the repair, straight through the original fiber underneath it, the kind of fold that never comes out, not with humidity, not with a press, not with God. Feels thin, Kovalik said. It's 130 years old. Right. He straightened up, looked at the crease, looked at her. Well, fix it. And there it is. 2 words. Fix it. Like she'd left a dish in the sink. Naomi did not raise her voice. That was the thing about the Cheon scroll. About all of them. You learn to keep your hands and your voice at the same temperature. Because a shaking hand ruins paper and a shaking voice ruins you. That's a mechanical crease through primary support, she said. It doesn't get fixed. It gets documented. Carol looked up from her phone. Naomi. It's a permanent alteration to the object. It goes in the condition report. That's the process. Naomi. Carol's voice did the thing it did. Dropped half a step, went warm, went dangerous. Dennis is here to help us. Let's not make the first 10 minutes about process. Kovalik was already turning away. He'd lost interest in the scroll the second he was done with it. That was what got her, not the thumb. The turning away. He damaged 130 years of somebody's grandmother's hands, and he was looking at the ceiling tiles now, counting them. Where's your camera? He said. Excuse me? Your camera's in here. He gestured at the corners with 2 fingers like flicking ash. I don't see any. There aren't any. He stopped, turned, and for 1 second, those pale gray eyes actually landed on her instead of near her. None? It's a conservation lab. No cameras. Light and lenses are a preservation risk, and the vault is upstairs. Naomi kept her hands at her sides. There's a card reader on the door. That's the record. And overnight, Kovalik said, it's just you. It's just me. He nodded, once, slow. Then he reached across his body with his right hand and turned the watch on his left wrist. Big stainless thing, dive bezel, way too much watch for a man in suede loafers. He gave it a quarter turn, back, another quarter turn. His eyes stayed on hers the whole time. That's efficient, he said. It's standard. Sure, he let the watch settle. How long's the shift? 9 to 6. And in 9 hours, how many people badge into this room? Naomi felt the question land somewhere under her ribs before her brain caught up to why. 1, she said. Carol laughed. A short, bright, administrative laugh, the kind that exists to move a room along. Naomi's very territorial about her space. It's a good thing. Dennis, honestly, the 8th floor is where the... Territorial. Kovalik tasted the word. That's a nice way to say it. He looked at the scroll one more time, not at the crease, at the whole thing, the way you look at a car in a lot. What's it worth? He said. That's not a conservation question. Humor me. It's not for sale, so it isn't worth anything. Naomi kept her hands at her sides. It's worth what it costs to keep it alive. That's the number I know. Something moved behind those gray eyes. Amusement, maybe. Or arithmetic. Naomi filed it. She didn't know what she was filing yet. But something in her, the same something that could tell a 1912 paper from a 1930 paper by the sound it made when you flicked it, said, remember this. Carol was already at the elevator. Dennis, the 8th floor has the Kang Holdings. We should... 1 second. Kovalik hadn't moved. He was looking at the shelf behind Naomi's table. Celadon pieces, 3 of them, behind glass, waiting on a mount job that had been in the queue for 8 months. Those go in the deaccession review. Those are not in my department, Naomi said. Everything's in the review. He smiled. It was a small smile, and it didn't get anywhere near his eyes. Nice to meet you. He'd already lost it. Her name. It had been 90 seconds. Naomi, she said. Right. The elevator swallowed them. The doors dragged. The old man groaned back up through the building. Naomi stood in the hum of the air handler and counted to 10. Then she got her phone. Now, understand what happens next, because it happens fast and it looks like nothing. She didn't cry. She didn't call anybody. She pulled her phone out of her apron pocket, turned the overhead ring light down to raking angle so the crease would throw a shadow, and she photographed it. 4 shots, straight on, raking left, raking right, and then the 4th one, the one that mattered. She pulled the frame back and got the crease and the accession tag in the same image, the little cream card with the number and the date, because a photo of damage without an accession number is a photo of nothing. And a photo with the tag is a fact. She checked it. Sharp, tag legible, crease legible. She looked at that 4th photo for maybe 2 seconds, and then she put the phone back in her apron and went back to work. And that was that. She had no idea what she'd just done. 6 hours she'd spent on that mount. She spent the next 40 minutes writing the condition report anyway. 4:47 a.m. Mechanical crease, approximates 4 centimeters, diagonal, upper mount, extending through primary support. Cause, direct contact, external party, during examination. She typed it out. She uploaded the images. She hit save. The report went into the system with her name on it. Nobody would read it. She wrote it anyway, because that's who she was, and because a thing that isn't written down didn't happen. And Naomi Bennett had spent her entire adult life on the side of the argument that says it happened. At 5:20, her phone buzzed on the steel cart. You still down there? Gloria. Gloria Whitfield was 52 years old and had been a paper conservator since before Naomi could read, and she had never once in 3 years learned that Naomi didn't need to be checked on. She checked on her anyway, every night, from Queens. Still here, Naomi typed. How's the Cheon? Naomi looked at the scroll. Compromised, she typed. Then she deleted it. Then she typed, ask me at 8. The typing bubbles ran for a long time. Baby, what happened? A consultant happened. The bubbles stopped, started, stopped. Kovalik? Naomi put the phone down, picked it up. You know him? I know the name. Carol's been saying it for 3 weeks in that voice. What voice? The one she uses before somebody's gone to Naomi? Listen to me. Write it down. Whatever he did tonight, write it down tonight. Not tomorrow. Already did. Photos? Photos. Good girl. Now don't send them to anybody. Naomi stared at that one. Why? Because the second you send it, it's a complaint. Right now, it's a record. Those are different animals, baby. 30 years of paper. Gloria Whitfield had watched 3 directors come and go, and she'd learned the whole language of a building. Who signs what, who reads what, who gets walked out on a Tuesday. Get some sleep, Gloria typed, and eat something that isn't from a cart. Naomi set the phone face down on the cart and put both hands flat on the steel. Here's what she had. Say it plain, the way she said it to herself at 5:30 in the morning in a room with no windows, because she had a habit of running her own numbers out loud when nobody was around to hear how bad they were. $88,000 in student loans, grad school, and a fellowship that paid in prestige, which is a word banks don't accept. $61,000 a year before tax in New York City to be the only person awake in a building full of things that outlive everybody. An apartment she didn't own, didn't rent, and couldn't stay in. Unit 34B of the Hallowell, East 61st. Marble lobby, doorman, the whole thing. She'd gotten it through a client, a collector who'd bought a place as an investment, moved to Singapore, and needed somebody to run the water and sign for packages and not throw parties. Apartment sitting. No lease, no rights, just a handshake and an email chain. 11 weeks left on it. 11. She'd counted them on the calendar in the kitchen with a pen, which is a thing you only do when you can't stop looking at it. And one friend. One. A 52-year-old woman in Queens with tortoiseshell readers on a beaded chain who texted her at 5:20 in the morning to ask about a scroll. That was the list. That was the whole list. Naomi Bennett was 28 years old. She could stabilize a 130-year-old object with a brush made of 40 hairs, and she had 11 weeks before she had nowhere to sleep. She picked the bone folder back up. The thing about a crease is that everybody who isn't a conservator thinks it's a wrinkle. It isn't. Paper is a lattice, millions of fibers hooked into each other by hydrogen bonds, and when you fold it, you don't bend the lattice, you break it. Those bonds snap. They don't reform. You can flatten it under a press for 6 months, and the paper will lie down flat and lie to your face, and the break is still there. And in 20 years, it'll open along that line like a scar deciding to be a wound again. You cannot fix it. You can only tell the truth about it and hope the next person reads the file. At 5:50, she started the humidification chamber anyway because you don't do nothing, and she sat on the stool with her elbows on her knees and looked at the fourth photo one more time. Crease, tag, shelf behind, glass. Her own ring light bouncing off the Celadon case in the corner of the frame like a smear. She didn't zoom in. 6 weeks from now, that decision would cost her everything she had left. And she'd sit in a diner on Roosevelt Avenue with cold coffee and her thumb on that same photo and understand that she'd been holding the answer the entire time. But it was 5:50 in the morning and the answer looked like a smear of light on glass. And she put the phone in her apron and went back to the scroll. At 6:04, the card reader chirped upstairs. Shift change. Naomi covered the mat with a sheet of glassine, weighted the corners, and washed her hands for 90 seconds like always. Up past the wrist, nails, between the fingers, because you don't leave a lab carrying what was in it. The stairwell to the lobby had a smell she'd stopped noticing, whetstone and floor polish. 4 flights up and the door opened into a marble entrance where a security guard named Ray had a crossword and a thermos. "Morning, Doc," Ray said. He'd called her that since her first week. Nobody else in that building called her anything. "Ray, anybody come through around 4:40? He looked up. "Miss Brennan and a fella." "You log him?" She said, "Don't bother." Naomi held that, turned it over, put it down. "Okay," she said. "Thanks, Ray." "You eat?" "I'm going to." "That's not a yes, Doc." "Ray." Naomi stopped with a hand on the door. "That fella? He come in with her, or was he already here?" Ray put the pen down. "Now that you say it." He scratched his jaw. "He come up from the garage." "The garage." Elevator was already down when she got here. She waited on it. He shrugged. Figured he parked. Naomi nodded like it was nothing. The garage level had one door into the stairwell, and that stairwell had one card reader, and the card reader was on her floor, and nobody had badged in tonight but her. "Okay," she said again. "Thanks, Ray." Outside, East 62nd was doing its 6 a.m. thing. A garbage truck, a woman walking 2 dogs in a bathrobe, the sky going the color of dishwater over the buildings. Naomi walked the 11 blocks instead of taking the train. She always walked. It was the only part of the day where nothing was worth $200,000. She was 3 blocks from the Hallowell when her phone buzzed. Carol. "Great energy this morning. Dennis is going to need lab access on his own schedule. Please make sure he can get in without going through you. Also, let's talk Friday about your hours." Naomi read it standing on the corner of 61st and 2nd with the light changing twice. "Without going through you." She read it again. 3 years. 3 years of being the only person in that building at 3 a.m., of catching a mold bloom on a 1908 folio because she happened to smell it, of turning a scroll back into a scroll one thread at a time, and Carol Brennan wanted the man who'd creased it to have a key to the room. Naomi typed, "Lab access requires conservation sign-off. That's board policy." She looked at it. She deleted it. She typed, "Understood." She looked at that. She deleted that too. She put the phone in her coat and crossed the street and let it sit unanswered, which is a thing you can only do for so long, and she knew it, and she did it anyway. The Hallowell's lobby was 40 feet of Italian marble, and one man behind a desk who nodded at her without using her name. 34 floors, 19 units above hers she'd never seen. She had a keycard on a lanyard she'd been given by a stranger's assistant, and she used it, and the elevator took her up to a floor that was not hers, in a building that was not hers, to run the water and sign for packages for 11 more weeks. 34B smelled like nothing. Furniture that belonged to a man in Singapore. Art on the walls she hadn't chosen. Bad art, expensive, the kind bought by the linear foot. A view of the park she'd stopped looking at in month 2. Naomi dropped her tote by the door. She stood in the middle of somebody else's living room in her work clothes at 6:40 in the morning, and she did the math one more time because she couldn't stop doing it. 11 weeks, 88,000, 61 before tax, 1 friend. Then she went to the closet and she took out the one thing in that apartment that was actually hers, a long silk robe, dusty sapphire. She'd bought it 4 years ago with the first check that ever cleared with the word conservator on the memo line, and it had cost more than she'd ever spent on anything, and she'd never once regretted it. Everything else she owned fit in 2 boxes. This was the thing. She put it on over the slip, barefoot on someone else's floor. She slept for 6 hours and dreamed about nothing. And when she woke up, the light through the window had gone gold. And there was a text from Gloria she hadn't answered, and a text from Carol she wasn't going to. And down in the basement of the Kang Whitmore Foundation, in a room with a card reader and no cameras, a scroll lay under glassine with a 4-centimeter crease in the top mount, and a condition report filed under Naomi Bennett's name. And in her apron pocket, on a phone she carried everywhere and never thought about, sat 4 photographs. 3 of them were evidence of a man's carelessness. The 4th one was evidence of something else entirely, and it would take her 6 weeks, 1 firing, and everything she owned in the world before she looked at it hard enough to see it. Carol Brennan didn't wait for Friday. She moved it to Thursday, 11 a.m., and sent the meeting invite at 10:42, which gave Naomi 18 minutes to wake up, put on the only blazer she owned, and walk 11 blocks on 4 hours of sleep. The 8th floor smelled like carpet glue and cold coffee. Carol's office had a window. Naomi had noticed that before and never let herself think about it. "Sit," Carol said. Naomi sat. Carol turned her laptop around. On the screen, the condition report. Naomi's name at the top. The 4 photographs loaded in a row underneath. Small, thumbnail-sized, the crease cutting diagonally across all of them like a scar somebody drew on with a ruler. "Walk me through why this exists," Carol said. "Because the damage exists." Dennis says he barely touched it. Dennis touched it for about 1.5 seconds. Naomi kept her hands flat on her knees. 1.5 seconds is enough. Paper doesn't negotiate. Carol's jaw moved sideways once. She had a vertical line between her eyebrows that got deeper when she was about to say something she'd rehearsed in the shower. "I'm restructuring the overnight." There it was. 3 nights a week instead of 5. Same hourly. Dennis needs the lab accessible during business hours for the DX session review, and I can't have the room locked around one person's schedule. Naomi did the arithmetic before Carol finished the sentence, because that's what your brain does when it's carrying $88,000 on its back. 3 nights, $61,000 a year becomes something starting with a 3. 11 weeks of free apartment becomes a countdown with a number at the end of it, and the number is not survivable. She held her face still. "The room isn't locked around my schedule," she said. "It's locked around 45% humidity. Dennis has been briefed." Dennis put his thumb through a 130-year-old mount because nobody briefed him that wet paste is wet. Carol's phone was in her hand. It had never left her hand. "I'm going to say this once, Naomi, and I'd like you to hear the whole thing before you respond. Foundations like this one don't survive on craftsmanship. They survive on the board believing the collection has a future. Dennis makes the board believe that. You make the paper flat. Those are not the same job, and only one of them keeps the lights on." Naomi looked at the window behind Carol's head. "Is he badged? He'll have a card by Monday. To my lab." "To the lab," Carol said. "It isn't yours." And that right there, was the sentence Naomi carried down 8 floors. Past Ray at the desk, out onto East 62nd, into a Thursday so bright it felt personal. She got to the corner before she pulled out her phone. Gloria picked up on the second ring, and the voice that came through wasn't Gloria's usual. It was tinny, far away, wrapped in wind. "Baby, I'm on a borrowed phone. What happened to yours? Carrier moved me, ported me to a whole new line and killed the old one dead, no warning. 22 years I had that number." A car horn somewhere behind her. "I'll send you the new one soon as this thing lets me, or you know what, I already left it with your people." "My what?" "Your building. That marble mausoleum you live in. I called down there last week when you weren't picking up. Told the man at the desk to write it down somewhere you'd see it, since apparently you answer a doorman faster than you answer me." Naomi laughed. It came out cracked, but it came out. "Gloria, don't. Tell me what she did. 3 nights. The wind went quiet on Gloria's end, the way it does when somebody steps into a doorway to hear better. "And the consultant? Gets a badge Monday." 1 syllable. Gloria could put a whole sermon in 1 syllable. "You keep those photographs where they are, on your phone, not in an email, the minute you send them. You're a woman with a grievance. Right now, you're a woman with a record, and those 2 things end up in very different rooms." "I know. Say it back." "I'm not sending them." "Good girl, eat something." And the borrowed phone died in the middle of the word something, because of course it did. The lobby of the Hallowell was 40 feet of marble and no mercy. Naomi had lived in that building 9.5 months, and the doorman had said her name exactly 0 times. He said, "Evening," and he said, "Ma'am," and once, memorably, he said, "Are you expected?" She stopped at the emergency board on Thursday night on her way up. It hung between the mailroom and the service corridor. A glass case, brass frame, a laminated sheet behind it with the numbers a building is legally required to post. Fire marshal, boiler contractor, building management, 24-hour, water shutoff. The kind of thing you walk past 400 times without reading a single line. Taped inside the bottom corner of the case, below the laminate, there was an index card. Handwritten, black ink, gone slightly gray, a 917 number, 10 digits, no name, no label, no little heading saying who it belonged to or what it was for. The tape at the corners had yellowed and lifted, which meant the card had been in there a while, long enough for the adhesive to give up. Naomi stood in front of the case with her bag on her shoulder and her blazer over her arm. Gloria said she'd left it with the building. Gloria, 52 years old, who thought the internet was a phase, who once mailed her a printed-out article. Gloria would absolutely call a Manhattan front desk and dictate her new phone number to a stranger and consider the matter handled. 9 Wasantin. Queens is 718 and 9 Wasantin both. Has been forever. Naomi took out her phone and photographed the card because her thumbs were tired and her eyes were worse. She typed the digits into a new contact. She stared at the empty name field for a second. Then she typed Gloria, new, and hit save. She didn't ask the doorman. She'd asked the doorman for things before. 19 floors above her head, in a room she had never seen and could not have described, that same 9 Wasantin number sat inside a phone on a table, and the phone had been silent for 6 days. Friday came the way bad Fridays come, slow, then all at once. She slept until 2. She woke up on top of the covers with the taste of pennies in her mouth and the Singapore owner's abstract painting staring at her from the opposite wall, a painting she'd never liked, in an apartment where nothing was hers. She counted it out on the kitchen island, not on her phone, on paper, in pen, because pen is honest. 11 weeks, 77 days. 3 nights a week at her hourly came out to about $2,300 a month after taxes. And the cheapest place she'd found on the sublet boards that wasn't a bunk bed in Bushwick was $1,900 plus first, last, and security. That's $5,700 to move. She had $4,100 and change and $88,000 of student debt sitting on her chest like a man. She circled the $4,100. Then she circled it again, harder, until the pen went through the paper. At 6 p.m. she stood in the shower until the water ran cold. At 7 p.m. she put on the robe. The dusty sapphire silk went over the slip, and her shoulders dropped an inch, the way they always did, and she tied it loose at the waist and left it open down the front and walked barefoot across a floor that belonged to a man in another hemisphere. 4 years she'd had that robe. Bought it with the first check that said conservator on the memo line, walked into a store where the girl followed her around and paid full price out of spite. At 8:40 she called the pizza place on 61st. Large, half pepperoni, half whatever the guy recommends, 30 to 40 minutes. She gave the address and heard him repeat the Hallowell in the tone people use for that building. She hung up and sat down on the floor with her back against the couch. And the apartment was so quiet she could hear the elevator moving in the shaft on the other side of the wall. 9 months in this building, 3 years in that city. One friend, whose phone number she'd just gotten off an index card in a lobby. Naomi picked up her phone. Gloria knew. At 9:12 p.m. on a Friday, wearing everything she owned that mattered, she typed 6 words and sent them before she could edit herself into being alone all night. Come over, I ordered pizza. She set the phone face down on the floor, and she stayed sitting there with her knees up and her head back, and she waited for the on the train she knew was coming. 19 floors up. The penthouse had no lamps on. It didn't need them. One wall of that apartment was screens, 12 of them, stacked 3 high, 4 across. And the light coming off those screens was the blue-gray of a fish tank, and it moved when the images moved. Seo Tai-hyun stood in front of them with a glass of water he hadn't touched. Screen 4 was the lobby. Screen 5 was the North Elevator Bank. Screen 9 was the loading dock on 61st, where a linen truck had been idling for 11 minutes, which was 2 minutes longer than a linen truck idles. His phone was face up on the console beside the water glass. It had 1 number in it, and that number reached 4 people alive. It lit. Come over, I ordered pizza. Taehyun looked at it. He didn't pick it up. The message sat there in white on black, the screen light throwing his shadow up the wall behind him, and the koi on the left side of his neck went in and out of the dark as the monitors cycled. Park Min-jae was standing 4 feet behind him with his hands folded in front of his belt buckle, the way he'd stood in rooms for 19 years, keycard on the steel reel at his hip, glasses catching the blue. Taehyun turned the phone so Min-jae could see it. Min-jae read it. His face did nothing. Then his face did one thing. The scar through his right eyebrow twitched, one time, a millimeter, and he took a breath through his nose that took slightly too long. Wrong number, Min-jae said. Whose? Somebody's. Taehyun picked up the phone then. He tapped once. The number expanded into a thread with no history. No prior messages, no name, nothing above it but white space. Who has this line, Min-jae? You, Sang-hoon, me, a pause the length of a heartbeat, Seoul, and who else? Nobody else. The linen truck on screen 9 put itself in gear and pulled out onto 61st, and neither man watched it go. Taehyun typed nothing. He set the phone down. He put 2 fingers on the console and stood there, and the water in the glass didn't move at all. And 30 seconds went by. And in those 30 seconds, a man who ran the Manhattan arm of the SEO organization did the only reckless arithmetic he'd done in a decade. Get the floor, he said. Min-jae was already at the terminal. He pulled the number against the resident registry, and the registry gave him nothing because the number didn't belong to a resident. So he did it the other way. He pulled every device that had touched the building's guest network in the last 10 minutes and cross-cut it against the ones the elevator cameras could put in a car. 34, Min-jae said. 34B. Something happened to Taehyun's face. It was very small. It went away almost immediately. 34B is the Singapore unit. The owner's in Singapore. There's a sitter. Min-jae's voice had flattened out into the register menus when they're reading a file they've already read. 9.5 months, no lease. Bennett, Naomi, 28, works nights at the foundation on 62nd. I know who's in 34B. Min-jae's hands stayed folded. Yes, sir. Taehyun looked at screen 4, at 40 feet of empty marble, at the doorman standing in it doing nothing. Min-jae's glasses caught the blue when he tilted his head. Sir, the correct move is nothing. She gets no answer. She calls her friend. The friend says, I never texted you. And by Sunday, the number is a story she tells at brunch. Nothing costs us nothing. And the incorrect move. You put your face 19 floors below your own door. Min-jae's hands stayed folded, in a hallway with a camera on it, for a woman who badges into a basement on 62nd. Taehyun turned his head, slow, an inch, no more, and looked at Min-jae for the first time since the phone lit. Say the rest of it. Min-jae held very still. There is no rest of it, sir. And a man who had spent 19 years being the quietest thing in every room he entered discovered, in that exact half-second, that he had just told his first bad lie in front of the one person on earth who could hear it. Where's Sang-hoon? Taehyun said. Garage. Tell him to bring pizza. Min-jae's chin came up half an inch. There's already a pizza coming. She ordered it. The order pinged the... Tell him, Taehyun said, to bring pizza. Yoon Sang-hoon was 26 years old, wiry, in a black bomber and white sneakers he cleaned with a toothbrush, and he took the call in the garage with 1 foot up on the bumper of a car worth more than his family's house. He listened for 4 seconds. How many? He said. He listened for 2 more. Then he hung up and started running. The pizza place on 61st was 110 meters east. At 9:19 on a Friday night, it had 11 pies on the racks and 6 in the ovens, and a kid at the counter named Miguel, who had been there since 3 and was counting the minutes to 11, and the door came open so hard the bell tore half off its bracket. All of them, Sang-hoon said. Miguel looked up. Every pizza, on the rack, in the oven, boxed, now. Sir, some of those are for... Sang-hoon put money on the counter. Not a card. Money in a band. In a stack, and he pushed it across the laminate with 2 fingers and kept pushing until it was on Miguel's side. Somebody's paying for a delivery to the Hallowell, Sang-hoon said. 34B. Yeah? That one first, then the rest. Boxes on my arms. Miguel looked at the money. Miguel looked at the 16 pizzas. Miguel, in the finest professional decision of his young life, said, yes, sir, and started boxing. 90 seconds later, a 26-year-old Korean man came out of a pizzeria on East 61st with 16 cardboard boxes stacked to his chin, walking fast. And the doorman at the Hallowell, the one who did not use Naomi Bennett's name, held the door open with his whole body and said absolutely nothing about it. Sang-hoon took the service elevator. Min-jae met him at 34 with a handout. "One," Min-jae said. "He said bring pizza." "He said bring pizza. He didn't say bring a parade." Min-jae lifted one box off the top of the stack. The one from the top, the one that was still warm through the bottom, the one with a receipt taped to the lid that said 34B. And he peeled the receipt off with his thumbnail and put it in his own pocket. He opened the lid, checked it, closed it. Then Min-jae handed the box to the man standing behind him in the hallway. And Seo Tae-hyun took it in one hand like it weighed nothing. And Sang-hoon backed into the service elevator with 15 pizzas and rode down and did not breathe out until the doors closed. At 9:21, Naomi's phone hadn't moved on the floor. She checked it twice. No dots. No. Nothing. The second check was the one that stung, because between the first and the second she'd gotten a glass down from the cabinet, filled it, put it on the counter, and left it there without drinking any of it. 9 months in that kitchen, and she still opened 2 cabinets before she found the right one. She sat back down on the floor. She pulled the robe over her knees. Then she did the arithmetic she'd been swatting away since Thursday, and this time she let it land. If Gloria was on the train, she'd be here by 10. If Gloria was asleep, she'd answer at 6 in the morning with 3 separate messages and a photo of her cat. If Gloria never got the text at all, then Naomi Bennett had spent her Friday night ordering a large pizza for one person in an apartment she'd be evicted from in 76 days by a handshake nobody wrote down. She'd started, in the way you do, building the small explanation. Borrowed phone, dead battery, Queens, the train, the carrier that ported a 22-year-old number into the trash. And she was almost all the way through convincing herself when the knock came. 2 knocks, not 3, not a rap. 2, spaced, unhurried, from a hand that had never in its life needed to knock a 3rd time. Naomi got up off the floor. She was barefoot and she was in the robe and she thought, pizza, and she thought, 9 minutes. That's the fastest anything has ever happened in this city. And she pulled the robe closed at the waist with one hand and opened the door with the other. There was a man leaning on her doorframe. He filled it, not tall the way tall men are tall the way a doorway is a suggestion. Dark shirt, sleeves folded back off the forearms, collar open on a throat with black ink climbing up the left side of it, a fish curved. Going up under the fabric, watch, ring, shoes that hadn't been outside. He had one open cardboard box balanced flat on his left palm. Naomi's hand stayed on the edge of the door, and it was the exact same grip she'd had on the edge of a table at 4:40 in the morning 3 days earlier, and she had no idea she was doing it. She had spent 3 years telling herself she could read a surface at a glance, that she could look at a thing and know how old it was, what it had been through, what it was pretending to be. She looked at him and got nothing back. Not a decade, not a job, not a reason. The only thing in the whole doorway that told her anything true was the fish on his neck, and it was already halfway under his collar. He looked at her for 1 second longer than a stranger has a right to. "You got the wrong number, neighbor," he said. His voice came out low and unbothered, and completely, insultingly patient, and he tipped the box a half-inch toward her, so she could see it was already open, already missing nothing, still steaming. "But since you invited me to dinner," Seo Tae-hyun said, "it'd be rude to let you eat alone." Naomi held the door where it was, 12 inches, enough for her body, not enough for his. "You read a text that wasn't for you," she said. "It came to my phone. That's not an invitation. You wrote the invitation." He tilted his chin an inch toward the box on his palm. "I'm just the wrong guest." She looked at his shoes. Clean soles, no grit, no street on them. A man who had not come in from outside. A man who had come from somewhere in this building. Her hand tightened on the door edge, and she made herself let go of it, 1 finger at a time, because gripping was a tell, and she knew what tells cost. "Where do you live?" she said. "Up. Up is 34 floors of answer. Then you can have the rest of it later." He shifted the box, and the smell came out of it and crossed the threshold before he did. Pepperoni, hot oil, burnt cornmeal. Her stomach turned over loud enough that she felt it in her jaw. She had eaten a granola bar at 2 in the afternoon, and nothing since, and her body chose that second to file its report. He heard it. He said nothing about it. That was the thing that moved her hand. She stepped back and opened the door the rest of the way. Aish. 9 months in a stranger's apartment, and the first person she ever let in was a man whose name she didn't have. He came in the way big men don't. No shoulder against the frame, no filling the room on purpose. He stopped 4 feet inside and looked at the furniture, the leather sectional, the abstract over the console, the lamp shaped like a stone. And something moved behind his eyes and went away again. None of it's mine, she said. I know. How? Nobody puts a lamp like that in a room they have to live in. She almost laughed. She caught it in her throat and killed it there, because laughing was a door too, and she'd already opened one tonight. She didn't have a table. She'd never needed a table. She ate standing at the counter at 6 in the morning, alone, over the sink. She took 2 plates out of the cabinet. The third cabinet, because after 9.5 months she still opened 2 wrong ones first, and turned around, and he was already on the floor. Not sitting, lowering. 6'4", folding down onto a rug with his back against the base of the sofa, one knee up, the box going flat on the boards between them like it belonged there. Watch on the wrist, sleeves already folded, forearms out, the ink on them going dark in the low light. He set the box down and pushed the lid all the way back on its crease and turned it so the cut side faced her. Sit, he said. Not an order. He'd made it into a place instead. He'd taken the floor, and now the floor was where dinner was. And if she stayed standing, she'd be the one being strange about it. Naomi sat. Sapphire silk pooled around her ankles. She pulled a slice free, and the cheese came with it in a rope, and she bit it too hot on purpose, because burning the roof of her mouth was better than saying the first thing she was thinking, which was, why is he so still? He ate 1 slice in the time she ate 2. He didn't talk while he chewed. When he set the crust down on the cardboard, he set it down without a sound. Your name, she said. Taehyun. That's half. Seo Taehyun. Seo Taehyun what? He looked at her. That's the whole name. That's not what I asked. I know what you asked. He reached for the second slice. You want the part that comes after the name, what I do. You'll like the name better. Try me. I own things on this street. Buildings. Some. This one? He chewed. He didn't answer. And here's the thing. A lie has a shape. Naomi had spent 6 years learning to read the shape of things people did to paper when they wanted you to believe something. A retouch, an overpaint, a fill. You don't catch the lie by staring at the lie, you catch it by the way the surrounding surface behaves. And his surface didn't behave at all. There was no fill. There was no seam. There was nothing to catch. Which meant either he was telling the truth, or he was the best restored object she had ever sat across from. 2 hours. She'd count it later on the microwave clock and not believe it. 2 hours on a rug that belonged to a man in Singapore, and at the end of it, she knew 4 things about Seo Taehyun. His name, that he was 34, that he'd been in New York 11 years, and that he drank water instead of anything else because he'd said no to the wine she offered without 1 syllable of explanation. 4 facts. She'd given him more than 4 facts in the first 10 minutes, and she'd tried not to. That was the trick of him. He didn't ask. He put a silence down like a plate and waited to see what you'd put on it. You work nights, he said, somewhere around the 4th slice. 3 now. 3. It was 5. She pulled crust apart with her fingers. They restructured me. Who's they? My director. Why? And she heard herself doing it, telling this man on the floor at 10 at night about hours and about a badge that got issued to somebody else by Monday. She stopped mid-sentence and put the crust down. I don't know you, she said. No, you're not going to help that. No. Then why are you still here? Because you haven't asked me to leave. He said it flat, like a fact about weather. You've asked me 9 questions. None of them was that one. Her face went hot. He was right, and being right about her out loud was a thing nobody had done since Gloria, and Gloria had earned it over 3 years. Leave, she said. He got his hand under himself to rise. Not yet, she said, and hated the shape of her own mouth saying it. And he settled back down without 1 flicker of triumph, which was somehow worse than triumph would have been. So she went at him from the side. How long do you have left in your place? I don't have a clock on my place. Everybody has a clock. Do you? And there it was. She should have swallowed it. She should have said something clean and closed and let the silence go hungry. Instead, maybe it was the third slice, maybe it was the 16 hours of that Thursday still sitting in her shoulders. She said, 11 weeks. He stopped with his hand half to the box. 11 weeks, she said again. And then I'm out. There's no lease. There's a handshake and an email chain with a man who lives in Singapore and doesn't answer on weekends. 76 days. I've got $4,100 and $88,000 in loans and no address after that. The apartment did what expensive apartments do. It ate the sound and gave her nothing back. He set his hand down on his knee. She braced for it. She knew exactly what was coming because she'd watched it come for other women her whole life. He was going to make it easy. He was going to say, I have units. Or, don't worry about that. Or he was going to reach for the pocket where men like him keep the answer. And the second he did, she was going to stand up and open that door and the pizza could stay on the floor for all she cared. She was already deciding how to say it. She had the words lined up behind her teeth. He said, That's a hard number. That was all. He picked his water up, drank half of it, and set it back down on the boards. Naomi sat there with her whole speech loaded and nowhere to fire it. He didn't offer. Not money, not a unit, not a name to call, not a favor she'd owe. He heard a woman say she'd be homeless in 76 days, and he let her keep it. He let it stay hers. That right there, was the only reason she didn't throw him out. You didn't flinch, she said. Should I have? Most people flinch. It's cheaper than helping. I know what it costs to help you, he said. I'm not going to guess at it in your living room. She turned that over twice and couldn't get it to lie flat. You've thought about it, she said. What it costs. For 9 minutes. He tipped his head an inch toward the door. Since your text. 9 minutes and you already priced my life. I priced the pizza, he said. The rest of it isn't mine to price. She got up. She got the water pitcher and refilled his glass without asking, because her hands wanted a job. And when she came back down onto the rug, she folded her legs under the silk and heard herself talking again. About the lab. 4 floors down, 68 degrees, 45%, no windows. About the scroll. Ink on mulberry, 1890s, off a boat in 1912. About wheat starch paste you cook at midnight and kozo tissue you tear instead of cut. Because a torn edge has fibers that reach and a cut edge just sits there and lies about being part of the paper. He listened like a man who had been listened to badly his whole life and had decided to do it correctly out of spite. And now there's a consultant, she said. He's restructuring us. He's the reason my hours are... His chewing stopped. 1 second. That's all it was. His jaw came to a halt with food in it, and his eyes went somewhere behind her left shoulder and came back, and his jaw started again. Same speed, same everything. Naomi had spent 6 years finding a fill under raking light. 1 second was a canyon. Say his name, Taehyun said. I didn't say I had one. Say it anyway. Why? Because you've been building to it for 2 hours and you don't know that you have. She put the slice down. Her mouth had gone dry and the water didn't touch it. Denis Kovalik. Nothing crossed his face. Nothing at all. And after 2 hours of nothing, she finally understood that the nothing was the reaction. A man doesn't hold a face that's still unless he's holding it. He put his thumb on my scroll, she said. Wet paste. He creased the primary support, 4 centimeters, diagonal, straight through the repair. Then he told me to fix it. Her voice went up, and she pulled it back down. You don't fix a crease. The lattice is broken. All you can do is write it down and sign your name to it. So I wrote it down. You wrote it down. At 4:47 in the morning, under my own name, with photographs. Something happened to him then, not on his face, in his hand. His fingers opened on his knee, all 4, and closed again. Where are the photographs? On my phone. Did you send them? No. To anyone. To nobody. It's a record, not a complaint. She lifted her chin. Why does that matter to you? Taehyun looked at the box for a while. Then he pushed it 2 inches to the side, so there was floor between them and nothing else, and he said, Because you're the only person alive who has touched both of them. Both of what? The scroll you repaired. He let that sit. And the one that's going to Geneva. The refrigerator kicked on behind her. She heard it the way you hear things underwater. There's no other scroll, she said. There's always another one. No, I mount them. I log them. She stopped. Because the sentence going through her head was not a sentence, it was a shelf. 3 celadon pieces behind glass. 8 months in the Mount Q. Those go in the deaccession review. Objects have left your building and come back, Tae-hyun said. You'd know how many better than me. What you wouldn't know is where they slept in between. Geneva, she said, a free port, a bonded warehouse where a thing can sit for 9 years and never technically enter a country. No tax, no customs, no name on a door, a number on a unit. He drank. Your consultant moves paper through a unit in that building. The lease on that unit is held by a holding company. The holding company is registered under a name. Whose name? Mine. The word went into the floor between them and stayed there. He's laundering through you, she said. He's laundering through a name I own and never look at. That's what a name like that is for. It's a shelf. Things get put on it. His voice didn't rise, and somehow that made it worse. For 9 months, I couldn't tell you why a man was buying 19th century Korean paper he can't read. Now a woman on East 61st tells me he put his thumb through a mount at 4 in the morning and asked her how many people badge in overnight. I didn't tell you he asked that. You didn't have to. He asked. Naomi's hands had gone cold. She put them flat on her thighs, on silk, and pressed until she could feel them again. So he damages the real one, she said slowly, working it the way she worked a surface, not staring at the loss, reading the edges. He creases it. Now it's got a condition report. Now it's got a documented flaw, filed at 447, with photographs by me. And the flawed one is worth less. So the foundation deaccessions it. Cheap, quietly, to a buyer he brings. Her breath came out. And the one that goes to Geneva under your name isn't the one that left my table at all. He watched her get there. He didn't help her get there. He watched. That's not a theft, she said. That's a laundry. The real ones go up on your shelf, and the fakes come back to my shelf, and I mount them, and I sign for them. She heard her own voice crack, and she hated it, and she kept going. I sign for them. My name goes on the paper. Every time. Yes. How long? 8 months on my side. Longer on yours. Say a number. I don't guess in front of people who can check. He looked at her. You can check. The accession log, she said. Quiet, flat, very fast. Every object that leaves has a line. Date out, date in, weight, signature. I've signed the intake on every piece that came back through that lab since the spring. I put my initials in the corner in pencil. Because that's what you do. Because the pencil means a person was there. Then there are sheets with your initials on them. And if the objects are wrong, then a person was there, Tae-hyun said. She was up. She didn't decide to stand. She was just standing, sapphire moving around her calves, looking down at a man on her floor who did not look up fast. And what stops him, she said. Right now, tonight, what stops him from... She didn't finish it. She didn't have to. The sentence had a shape, and they both saw it. No cameras. 1 witness per shift. He got up. It took him a long time. And when he was up, the room was smaller. Nothing stops him, Tae-hyun said. That's why I'm on your floor. Then say the whole thing. You've touched the real one, and you'll touch the forgery. And there is no third person who can say they're different objects. That makes you the only proof that exists. He reached into his trouser pocket. It also makes you the correction. The what? The thing he fixes. Her arms came up across herself and she made them go back down. He held out his hand. In it was a card, matte black plastic, no printing, no logo, 1 silver notch in the corner. Freight elevator, he said. West shaft. It doesn't stop on residential floors, and it doesn't log to the concierge desk. It goes to the loading dock on 61st, and it goes to the roof, and it goes to one other place. Which place? Mine. Naomi looked at the card and didn't take it. So this is the part, she said. This is where you tell me I'm in danger and hand me the thing that makes me yours. It's a card. It's a leash with a chip in it. Then leave it on the floor. You want me to run upstairs the second I'm scared? I want you to be able to. Something came into his voice for the first time all night, and it was gone before she could name it. That's the whole difference. And what do you get? Nothing. Nobody gives away nothing. I'm not giving you anything, he said. You're the one holding the record. I'm the one with a name on a lease I can't take back. If you're gone, he's finished cleaning up, and I find out I was laundering forgeries for a dead woman's signature. So no, this isn't charity, Naomi. I'm not standing here because you're small. I'm standing here because you're the only thing between me and 8 months I can't explain. It was the first time he'd used her name. She noticed. He didn't. She took the card. Her fingers closed around it, and it was warmer than she expected, off his body. And she turned it once, so the notch caught the light, and then she looked up at him with her chin level. I'll use it, Naomi said, when I decide. That's not how a card like that works. It's how this one works. She slid it into the pocket of the robe, and the silk swung with the weight of it, and that small pull at her hip was the only thing in 9.5 months that had felt like it was hers. You don't get to be the reason I move. I'll take the door. I'm not taking the hand. Seo Taehyun looked at her for a beat longer than a stranger has any right to. Then that's better than what I came with, he said. He crossed to the door. He didn't say goodbye, and he didn't offer his number, and he didn't tell her to be careful, and every one of those omissions landed on her like a brick, because she suddenly understood that she already had his number. It had been in her phone since Thursday night. It was saved under the name of the only friend she had. She said, "Wait." The door closed. Naomi stood alone in a room that wasn't hers, with a pizza box open on the floor and a card in her pocket, and pulled out her phone. She opened the thread with the last message she'd sent. "Come over, I ordered pizza," and put her thumb on the contact name at the top of the screen. Gloria knew. Her thumb sat on the name for 4 seconds, and then she locked the screen and put the phone face down on the rug. Calling it would give her an answer. She had spent 3 years learning that an answer you get at midnight is worth less than a number you can check. She stood up. The card in the robe pocket swung against her thigh, and she felt it swing, and she let it. Then she pulled the robe off, folded it over the arm of a sofa that belonged to a man in Singapore, and put on jeans. 11:41 at night, and Naomi Bennett walked out of the Hallowell through the front door. Not the west shaft, not the black card. The lobby, the marble, the doorman who said evening to the air beside her head. She wanted the log, and she wanted the log the way she'd want any document she planned to stand behind, badged in, time-stamped, her name on the reader like it had been on that reader 1,100 nights before. 11 blocks. She walked them in 14 minutes. The night desk on 62nd had a guard she'd seen maybe 6 times and never named. He glanced at her badge, glanced at the clock, and went back to his phone. She wasn't scheduled. She wasn't unscheduled either. That was the crack in the floor of Carol's restructuring, and Carol hadn't noticed it yet. Cutting her to 3 nights hadn't cut her card. It had just given her 4 free ones. The freight elevator took her 4 levels down. 68 degrees, 45%. No windows, no clocks that mattered, no cameras, just the reader on the door, blinking green at 12:03 a.m. She went to the mat first. Glassine, still flat, the Cheon scroll under it, the crease running its diagonal like a scar somebody had signed. She left it covered. She wasn't there for the scroll. The accession log lived in 2 places, which is why it had never been cleaned. The database was on the server. Anyone with a badge could pull it, and anyone with an administrator's password could edit it. And Naomi had watched Carol's fingers on a keyboard, enough times to know Carol had that password, and no imagination about what it was for. The other place was a ledger. Buckram cover, gone soft at the corners. Kept in the second drawer of the intake cabinet, because a registrar in 1974 had decided that objects leaving a building get written down in ink by the hand that carries them out, and nobody since had been bored enough to stop. Naomi pulled both. She opened the ledger flat on the light table and turned the pages backward, month by month, and started reading the only thing in a conservation lab that never lies about itself. Weights. Every object that leaves gets weighed, not because anyone cares what a scroll weighs, because paper drinks the room. A hanging scroll gains and sheds moisture like a lung. You weigh it on the way out, and you weigh it on the way in, and if the number moved, you know the object spent time somewhere with different air, and you write that down. And someday a conservator you'll never meet reads it and understands why the mount buckled. It was the most boring column in the building. It was the only column nobody had thought to launder. The first one was in March, a Joseon revival album leaf, out to an approved viewing facility, back in 9 days. Out, 481 grams. In, 478. She read the 2 numbers twice. Then she sat down. 3 grams. On a paper object, in a 9-day window, 3 grams is a room change. 3 grams is a truck. 3 grams is nothing at all, and any conservator alive would write it down and forget it by lunch. She turned the page. The second one was in April. Out 462. In 459. 3 grams. Her hand went flat on the table, fingers spread, the way it goes flat on a mat when a repair starts to lift, and you need to know if it's the paste or the paper, because moisture is a bell curve. Moisture is April coming in heavier, and October coming in lighter, and a warehouse in Queens giving you +6 one week and -2 the next. Moisture is noise. 3 grams, 3 grams, 3 grams is not noise. 3 grams is a machine. She got up and went to the intake scale anyway, because a conservator who trusts a number she hasn't tested is just a person with an opinion. Calibration weight out of its case, 200 grams. The display gave her 200.0 and held it. She did it twice more. The scale was honest. The scale had been honest for 11 years, and it was the only thing in that building she could say that about. She went through the whole book. It took her until 1:15, and by the end she had 7 objects, 7 lines, spread over 8 months, none of them adjacent, none of them the same category. 1 album leaf, 2 hanging scrolls, a folding screen panel, 3 lengths of mounted silk-backed paper. All of them out to facilities with names that were mostly initials, all of them back inside 11 days. All of them exactly 3 grams lighter than the thing that left. The same object doesn't lose the same weight 7 times. 7 different objects don't lose the same weight ever, but 7 copies made on the same paper stock, cut to the same dimension, mounted by the same hand with the same paste and the same backing, and weighed on the same scale. Those come out identical. 3 grams identical, because the forger wasn't matching the scale. He didn't know the scale existed. He was matching the object. Naomi laughed once out loud, 4 levels under the street, and the sound came back off the concrete and startled her. Then she looked at the signature column. Every line that leaves needs 2 signatures. The registrar releases, someone above the registrar authorizes. 7 lines, 7 authorizations. The same lean forward slanting hand, the D collapsed into a hook, the K a scratch, the whole thing written by a man who signed things fast because he'd never once believed anyone would read it. D. Kovalik. 8 months of D. Kovalik, in a ledger, in ink, in a drawer, in a room with no cameras and 1 witness. She checked the database next. The database was clean. Of course it was clean. Somebody had gone in and squared the weights to the gram, 7 times, and left them beautiful. Naomi sat very still and let the last piece arrive. Somebody had squared them, somebody with the password, somebody who knew the number was there, which meant somebody who knew what the number was for, which meant somebody in that building had understood the column well enough to hide it. And Dennis Kovalik had needed 90 seconds to forget her name. She photographed the ledger, all 7 spreads, straight on, then raking, the way she photographed everything, because that was the only way her hands knew how to hold a camera over a flat object. Then she photographed the database screen beside the ledger page, both in frame, the clean number and the true number in the same shot. She sent it to nobody. She wrote a memo instead, at 1:52 a.m., in the same system where she'd filed the condition report, under her own name, with the same flat language. 7 accession numbers, 2 weights each, 1 signature, no accusation, no adjective, no theory. Cause, unknown. Recommend, registrar review. Record, not complaint. She read it once and hit submit, and the system put a timestamp on it, and somewhere on a server, the memo went into a queue that 4 people had access to, and one of them was Carol Brennan. Naomi sat in the chair in the empty lab with her hands around her elbows and looked at the Celadon shelf without seeing it, and what she was doing was the thing she had done since she was 9 years old, waiting for Monday, because Monday was when the adults were in the building. She should have gone home and packed a box. Monday, 8:38 in the morning, 8th floor, and Carol Brennan's office had a window, which is a sentence that explains most of the Kang Whitmore Foundation if you sit with it. Naomi walked in without knocking. Carol was standing behind her desk with the phone in her hand and the laptop already open, and she looked up with the expression of a woman who had read something at 6 a.m. and spent 2 hours deciding what her face would do about it. Naomi, sit down. Naomi stayed standing and put her own phone on the desk, screen up, the ledger spread filling it. 7 objects, she said. 8 months. Every one of them came back 3 grams lighter than it went out. Exactly 3, not near 3. Carol looked at the phone, not at the screen, at the phone, the object. The way you look at a thing you're planning to describe later, you pulled the physical log. I pulled the physical log. On Saturday, at 1 in the morning, on a night you were not scheduled. The weights are in ink, and they're in the machine and they don't match, Naomi said. One of those two was edited. Ink doesn't edit. Naomi, ask me who authorized all 7. Carol set the phone down. Her phone. She set her own phone down on the desk, screen black, and Naomi watched her do it, and understood that she just watched a woman clear her hands. I know who authorized them, Carol said. Dennis is the acquisitions consultant. Authorizing outbound loans is what a consultant does. That's the job. That's literally the job description you're describing to me like it's a crime. He signed 7 releases for objects he can't read, to facilities with initials for names, and every single one came back a forgery. The word landed in the room and sat there. Carol's eyes went past her, to the door, and stayed there half a second too long. That's a serious word, said a voice behind Naomi. He was leaning on the frame, navy suit, no tie, collar open on the shaving rash, the burgundy portfolio flat under his arm. On his belt, brand new, on a fresh plastic clip, a badge she had never seen before. White, printed, Laibi, Monday. He'd had it 40 minutes. Dennis, Carol said, I know what it is. Kovalik came in 3 steps and stopped. He looked at Naomi's phone on the desk, and then at Naomi, and then he did the thing. He reached across his own body with his left hand and took hold of the stainless watch on his right wrist and turned it a quarter turn. Back. Again. Naomi felt the floor tilt 1 degree, because she'd seen those fingers do that once before, at 4:40 in the morning, 4 levels down, 3 feet from an open mat, and at the time she'd catalogued it the way she catalogued everything and filed it and never asked what it was for. Now she knew what it was for. He wound the watch and said gently to Carol, She's been under considerable stress. Dennis, cut to 3 nights. That's a 60% income event for someone at her band. He said it like a man reading a chart. She's got what, 80-something in loans? Housing's informal. I'm not judging, I'm saying that's pressure, and pressure looks like this. A small open hand at the phone on the desk. It looks like a person in an empty basement at 1 in the morning building a story out of a column nobody's read since 1974. You've read it, Naomi said. The watch stopped turning. It was a half second, less. But she was a woman who could see a fill in an 80-year-old retouch under raking light, and she saw it. The hand went still and the face didn't. I've read the accession policy, Kovalik said. That's diligence. I didn't say policy, I said the column. Carol's voice came in over the top of it, high and fast. Naomi, this is exactly what I was afraid of. And Naomi turned and looked at her, and something in Carol's face was wrong in a way she couldn't name yet. Not guilty, rehearsed. The line had a groove in it. Afraid of, Naomi repeated. You badged into that lab on Saturday at 12:03 a.m., and again, you were down there for 2 hours on an unscheduled night. Carol turned the laptop around. There it was, the card reader log. Green, time-stamped, her name, twice. You accessed register records? That's not your department. That has never been your department. You photographed foundation documents on a personal device. I filed a memo, under my own name, in your system, at 1:52. You photographed foundation documents on a personal device, Carol said again. The same words, the same rhythm, and Naomi finally heard it, heard that it had been written down somewhere before it was spoken. Heard that she was standing in a room listening to a woman read. Kovalik studied the ceiling like a man being patient in a doctor's waiting room. Effective immediately, Carol said. Your access is suspended and your position is terminated. Unauthorized access to restricted records. HR will send the letter. The room did nothing. The window did nothing. Somewhere down the hall a printer woke up and ran. The scroll is in a humidification chamber, Naomi said. Carol blinked. The Cheon scroll. It's been in humidification since Friday. Somebody has to take it out today, or the mount will cockle and you'll lose the top third. We'll manage it. Nobody in this building can manage it. That's not an insult, Carol. That's the staff list. We'll manage it, Carol said. And that, not the firing, not the watch. Not the word terminated. That was the moment Naomi Bennett's hands started shaking. She put them in her pockets, and they shook in her pockets. Kovalik moved out of the doorway to let her through. He'd been standing in it the whole time. He stepped aside like a man holding a door at a restaurant, and as she passed him, he said, at a volume made for exactly one listener, "You'll want to keep the photos." She stopped. "Everybody keeps the photos," he said. "It's the healthy thing. It gives you the sense that you did something." She got 14 steps down the hall before she understood that he had just told her the truth. And it had been the only true sentence in the room, and he'd handed it to her as a kindness. They gave her a box, an actual cardboard box, from the supply closet. And a woman from HR she'd met twice walked her down to the basement and stood in the doorway of her own lab while Naomi took 11 years of tools off a bench. Brushes, the 40 hair one, her bone folder, worn to the shape of her thumb, her loop, a tin of pins, a photograph of Gloria at a conference in 2019 holding a sandwich. She left the paste. It goes bad in 3 days anyway. The HR woman watched her wrap the loop in a paper towel and said, to the wall, that this was nothing personal, and that Naomi's work had always been excellent. Naomi asked her what her name was. The woman told her. Naomi said thank you, and wrote it on the inside flap of the box with a pencil, and the woman stopped talking after that. Pencil in the corner means a person was there. Somebody had told her that on Friday night, sitting on her floor, and she'd thought it was a nice line about paperwork. At the door, she turned around and looked at the mat under the glassine, and the chamber humming in the corner with a 130-year-old object breathing inside it, and the celadon behind glass on the shelf with 8 months of dust on the mount job nobody would ever cue again. Then she went up 4 levels and out onto East 62nd Street, and it was raining, not a storm. The gray steady kind that New York does on a Monday, that gets into a cardboard box in 90 seconds and turns the bottom to oatmeal in 5 minutes. She stood on the sidewalk, holding it against her chest, and she saw it. All at once. Standing still, in the rain, with a printer running somewhere 4 floors above her head. He hadn't damaged the scroll, because he was careless. She had been building the wrong picture for 11 days. The picture where a rich man with no manners put a thumb through wet paste because rich men break things. That picture had a hole in it the size of a thumb, and the hole was this. He asked about the cameras. First, he asked how many people badge in overnight before he ever touched the mount. He got the answer. None. One. And then he reached across an open mat in front of a witness and made a permanent mark and told her to fix it because the mark was never the point. The mark was a fitting. He was trying the room on. 7 objects came back 3 grams light because the channel was already running. The channel was 8 months old. It didn't need her lab. It needed a lab. 1 room, 4 levels down, no lens on the ceiling, and exactly 1 human being per shift who could ever testify that the thing that came back was not the thing that left. He hadn't chosen the Kang Whitmore Foundation for its collection. He'd chosen it for its staffing. Cut her to 3 nights. Get the badge. Get her card in the reader on a night nobody expected her. Get her fingerprints on the registrar's drawer. Get the word forgery out of her mouth, in a room with a witness and a rehearsed line. Every step she'd taken since 4:40 that morning had been a step she'd chosen, and every single one of them had been on a track somebody else laid down. She'd thought it was about art. She'd thought the scroll was the victim, and she was the inconvenience. The art was the cover story. The whole 8 months, the Freeport, the initials, the beautiful, clean database, all of it existed downstream of one question, and Dennis Kovalik had asked her that question to her face on her first night, and she had answered it honestly, and he had said, "That's efficient. How many people badge in overnight?" Because it was never about what could be stolen quietly. It was about who could be erased quietly. The rain came through the box. The bottom went first, the way it always does, and her loop hit the sidewalk and rolled, and Naomi Bennett stood on East 62nd Street with brushes at her feet and understood that she was now exactly what he needed her to be, unemployed, unscheduled, unhoused in 72 days, and on record, in her own handwriting, as a woman under considerable stress. She crouched and picked up the loop. Her phone buzzed in her back pocket. She wiped her hand on her jeans and looked. It was the foundation system, saying goodbye the way systems do. Her account was closed, and under that, in gray, the automatic courtesy line the software sends whenever a queued item leaves the queue before anyone opens it. Memo 4471, withdrawn by administrator. 8:41 a.m. 3 minutes after she'd walked into that office, before Carol had said one word about a card reader, the memo was gone. The 7 lines were still in ink, in a drawer in a basement 4 levels down, in a room where, as of 9 minutes ago, exactly 1 man in the building held a brand new white badge that said lab. Naomi stood up in the rain with the loop in her fist and started walking. 11 blocks in the rain with a box that had already quit. Naomi carried it against her chest with both forearms under it. The way you carry a thing that has stopped being a container and become a pile. The loop rode in her fist. Water came off the awnings on third and sheets when the wind turned, and she walked through it at the same pace she'd walked at midnight on Friday, because slowing down meant thinking, and thinking meant standing still on a sidewalk in front of strangers. Her phone went off twice more inside her jacket. She let it. The doorman held the door with his shoulder and looked at the box. "Ma'am." "Morning." That was the whole conversation, and it was the longest one they'd ever had. The elevator smelled like somebody's dry cleaning. 34 floors. She watched the numbers and did the arithmetic she'd been doing since the sidewalk. Unemployment took 3 weeks to land, if it landed. $4,100. 72 days of roof. The math held right up until she opened her email. She was standing in the hallway outside 34B with the box balanced on one knee and her key in the door, and she checked her phone the way you check a burn, quick, once, to see how bad. 2 of the messages were HR. One of them wasn't. The subject line was 5 words. Change of plans, Unit 34B. She read it with the key still in the lock. The owner's assistant in Singapore was writing on behalf of the owner. The owner had received an offer on the unit. The offer was contingent on immediate vacant possession. The arrangement with Ms. Bennett had always been informal, and neither party had ever executed a lease, which the assistant noted twice in one paragraph, in 2 different ways, the way people write when someone else has already written it for them. The owner regretted the short notice. The owner's representative would attend at 11:30 this morning to collect the keys and inspect the unit. The owner wished her well. Timestamp: 8:52 a.m. Naomi stood in the hallway and let that number sit on her tongue. 8:52. 7 minutes after Carol Brennan said, "Effective immediately." While she was still in the supply closet looking for a box, she turned the key. The door opened onto the Singapore owner's furniture, the Singapore owner's art, the Singapore owner's lamp that nobody puts in a room they have to live in. She set the wet box on the floor, and the bottom finished dying, and the pins went everywhere, a lot of them, skittering across a rug she'd never once vacuumed, because it had never once been hers. She looked at the clock on the stove. 10. 4:04. 86 minutes. Here's what she did with the first 4 of them. Nothing. She stood in the middle of a room she'd slept in for 9.5 months and let her hands shake all the way out, start to finish, without putting them anywhere. When they stopped, she picked up the pins one at a time because they were hers, and because a person who has just been given 86 minutes does not get to leave anything on a floor she can't come back to. Then she called Gloria on the number Gloria had left with a man at a front desk, and it rang, and a stranger's voicemail answered, and Naomi hung up and stared at the phone. 2 seconds, maybe 3. She opened her thread with Gloria, new. 1 message, hers, sent Friday at 9:12, no reply above it, no reply below it, a message that had gone somewhere and been answered by a man in the doorway 9 minutes later. She looked at the contact name at the top of the screen the way she'd looked at it Friday night. Then she closed it and dialed the old number, the 22-year-old one, the dead one, because sometimes the body tries a door it already knows is welded shut. 3 rings. "Baby?" Naomi's throat closed. "Your line's back." "They put it back Saturday. 22 years they take it. They hand it to a boy in Ohio. Then they call me and say it was an error in the port request." Gloria's voice sharpened. "You've been calling the wrong Gloria." Something in the way she said it. On the other end, a chair moved. "I lost my job this morning, and I have 81 minutes to be out of this apartment." The pause on the line was 3 heartbeats long. "Don't move," Gloria said. "Don't sign anything. Don't call anybody. Where's your box?" "On the floor." "It's dead." "Then find a better box. I'm getting in the car." Queens to East 61st on a rainy Monday is 50 minutes if the BQE is a friend, and it was not. Gloria did it in 38. Naomi never asked how, and Gloria never said, and the only evidence was the way the woman came through the door of 34B with her tortoiseshell readers pushed up into her hair and her canvas tote still over one shoulder and her breath going. She looked at the room first, which was the tell. Not at Naomi, at the room. 2 boxes stood by the door, taped, labeled in marker. Everything Naomi owned in the world. The robe was folded on top of the nearer one, dusty sapphire on brown cardboard, and it was the only color left in the apartment. "That's it?" Gloria said. "That's it. 9.5 months and it's 2 boxes. It was always 2 boxes. Naomi wiped her hands on her jeans. Everything else in here belongs to a man in Singapore who's never said my name. Gloria set the tote down. She walked the room, kitchen, window, hallway, back, and she was doing what conservators do, which is read a surface for what happened to it. And what had happened to this one was that a woman had lived in it without unpacking for 9.5 months, in one robe, out of 2 boxes, and had called that a life. Read it to me, Gloria said. Naomi handed over the phone. Gloria pulled the readers down and read the email twice, lips moving on the second pass. Then she said, flat, contingent on vacant possession. That's the part. That's not how a sale works. That's not how any sale works, baby. A buyer takes possession at closing, and closing is 60 days out on a good day in this city. She scrolled up. 8:52. 7 minutes after. Gloria's jaw set. She handed the phone back and stood there with her hand still out, empty, like the phone was still in it. Who told a man in Singapore that this morning was the morning? Naomi held her eyes. Say his name, Gloria said. And Naomi heard the echo of a Friday floor and a man drinking water, and she said it anyway, because it was true from 2 directions now. Dennis Kovalik. He knows the owner. He knows everybody's owner. That's the job description. Naomi looked at the taped boxes. He's an acquisitions consultant. What do you think he acquires? Gloria took her glasses off. She cleaned them on the hem of the floral blouse, slowly, and she took too long doing it, and when she put them back on her face, had changed. Sit down. I've got 62 minutes. Sit down. Naomi sat on the arm of a sofa that belonged to somebody else. Gloria pulled the room's one straight chair around and sat in front of her, knees almost touching, hands on her own knees. On Friday, Gloria said, when I called you back and the line dropped, you were in the lobby of this building. Yes. You told me you'd fixed my number. Naomi's chin came up 1/2 inch. And then Saturday, I get my old line back, and I call you, and you don't answer, and I figure you're working. Gloria's voice stayed level. Baby, when'd you last hear from me on a number you saved out of that glass case downstairs? The apartment was very quiet. Never, Naomi said. Never. Gloria nodded once. So who answered you? Naomi looked at the floor where the pizza box had been on Friday. The rug had a mark on it. 2 feet of grease shadow in a rectangle where a hot cardboard bottom had sat for 2 hours. A man came to the door, she said. To this door. 9 minutes after I sent it. 9 minutes. Gloria let that sit. With food. With the pizza I ordered. Open. Still hot. And where'd he come from? Up. Gloria took off her readers again, and this time she didn't clean them. She held them by one arm and let them hang, and she leaned forward with her elbows on her knees, like a woman about to lift something heavy. How long you been in this building, Naomi? 9.5 months. And how long you figure that card's been taped in that case? The tape had been yellow. The ink had gone gray. Naomi had noticed both, in the way she noticed everything about paper, and had filed neither, because she'd been looking for a friend's phone number, and the brain gives you what you came for. A long time, she said. Gloria reached over and put one hand flat on the folded robe. Baby, she said, that man upstairs has known your name a lot longer than you've known his. The refrigerator cycled on. Naomi didn't move for a full 4 seconds, which for her was a scream. Then she stood up and walked to the window. And the rain was doing its slow gray work over East 61st, 34 floors down, and shrunk to nothing. And she looked at the glass instead of through it. Because here's the thing about a woman whose whole trade is reading a surface for what's underneath. She'd sat 2 hours on a floor with him and found no seam, no overpaint, no fill. She'd taken that as evidence. She'd been wrong about what it was, evidence of. He said 9 minutes, she said to the window. What? He told me he thought about my situation for 9 minutes, from the text to the door. Her voice was very even. 9 minutes to think about a stranger. Gloria said nothing, which was the kindest thing available. But he already knew where I worked. He knew the foundation was on 62nd. He knew about Kovalik before I finished the word consultant. Naomi put 2 fingers on the glass and took them off, and there were 2 prints there now, and she watched them fade. 9 minutes was the pizza, Gloria, not me. He'd had me for a lot longer than 9 minutes. You're gonna want to be careful with that word. Which one? Had. Naomi turned around. You don't know what he's been doing with your name, Gloria said. You know he had it. Those are two different objects, and you of all people know it. Don't you go writing the condition report before you've looked at the raking light. I don't have time to look at anything. Naomi checked the stove clock. I have 44 minutes and an address I don't have. You have an address. It's in Sunnyside and it has a bad radiator and a sister-in-law's futon and me in the next room. Gloria, don't. Gloria stood up, and she was 5'4" in orthopedic loafers, and she filled the room. That's not a favor, and I'm not gonna let you make it one. You've been alone in a marble box for 9 months, and you called it independence, and I let you, because you were paying your loans, and you were happy and it wasn't my business. It's my business now. You'll take the futon. Naomi's hands went into her pockets. 2 weeks, she said. 2 weeks, Gloria agreed. And both of them knew it wasn't 2 weeks, and neither of them corrected it. And that's what it is to have exactly one friend. The representative arrived at 11:09, which was 21 minutes early, which told Naomi everything about how urgent an urgent sale is. A woman in a raincoat with a clipboard and a lockbox. She said the word walk-through and started in the kitchen, opening cabinets. And Naomi watched her open the wrong two first, and then find the plates on the third, and something about that landed harder than the email had. There's no damage, Naomi said. The woman ticked a line. It's procedure, ma'am. There's no damage because I never put a nail in a wall. Check the walls. The woman checked the walls. She wrote none, and she looked up, and for half a second she was a person. Where are you going? She asked. Queens? Gloria said from the door. The woman held out her palm, and Naomi put the key in it. And the key had never had a keychain, because a keychain is what you buy for a place you're staying. They carried the boxes out at 11:14. Gloria took the light one and complained about it. Naomi took the heavy one, and the robe went on top, folded, and something in the right pocket knocked against the cardboard with a hard, flat sound. She stopped in the hallway. She set the box on the carpet, and she put her hand into the pocket of the robe, and she took out the black card. Matte plastic, 1 silver notch. It weighed almost nothing, and it had been pulling that silk down for 3 days. What's that? Gloria said. A door. A door to what? Naomi turned it over in her fingers. West shaft, loading dock, roof, and one other place. Doesn't log at the concierge terminal. I'll use it when I decide. Nothing, she said, and put it in her jeans and picked the box back up. The lobby of the Hallowell was 40 feet of marble, and it was doing its usual trick of making everyone in it slightly quieter than they wanted to be. Naomi came out of the residential elevator with a box against her chest, and Gloria behind her, and she got 6 steps toward the doors before a man stepped out of the corridor by the mailroom and stood in her path. Charcoal 3-piece, buttoned all the way, navy tie, rubber-soled shoes that hadn't made a sound, a steel reel at his hip with a keycard on it. Ms. Bennett. Naomi stopped. She had never seen this man in 9.5 months, which in a building where she'd memorized the doorman's shift rotation was its own piece of information. Do we know each other? No. He had a folded paper in his left hand. Park Min-jae, building operations. Then get out of my way, Park Min-jae. I'm on a clock somebody else set. She moved. He moved into it. Not fast, not touching her, just standing where she was going to be. Gloria came up on Naomi's shoulder and squared herself, and the scar through his right eyebrow went pale as the muscle under it tightened. 80 seconds, he said. Then I hold the door. Why? Because in 80 seconds, you're going to walk out of this building believing something that isn't true, and I've decided I can't let that happen. You've decided? Yes. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Then she crouched, set the box on the marble, and stood back up with her hands free. Talk. He held out the paper. She took it, unfolded it. It was a printout, plain, from a system that had never been designed for anybody's eyes but a machine's. A header, a column of dates, a column of times, a column of camera IDs, a column of floor references. Page 1 of several. She turned it over. Page 2, page 3. Every line said 34. She read faster. October, November, a Tuesday in January at 6:07 a.m., a Thursday in March at 6:11. April, April, April. Times that sat in a window 90 minutes wide over and over at the hour a woman who badges out of a basement at 6 comes home from work. These are elevator cameras, she said. North Bank, residential. On my floor. On your floor. For how long? The file opens 8 months ago. Naomi's eyes went to the bottom of the page, to the small gray line where systems record the thing they're never asked about. Terminal, PH. Penthouse. She looked up. He lives upstairs, she said. Min-jae's face gave her nothing, and that in itself was an answer, because a man who works in a building tells you where the boiler is without being asked. 19 floors, Naomi said. 19 floors above my ceiling, for 8 months, watching a hallway I walked down at 6 in the morning in a bathrobe. Ms. Bennett, he sat on my floor. Her voice never rose. That was the worst part of it. Gloria heard it and put a hand near Naomi's elbow and didn't touch her. He ate off my rug and told me he owns things on this street and let me ask him where he lives and said, up, like it was a joke, and let me hand him my number of days and my dollar amount and my whole... She stopped. She folded the printout in half, then in half again. Why are you giving me this? Min-jae's hand went to the reel at his hip and came away. He was quiet for exactly as long as it takes to unpick 19 years of habit. Because you should know what's on the paper, he said, before you decide what you owe anybody. That's not an answer. It's the one I have today. 8 months of my hallway on your terminal, Naomi said, and the answer you have today is a shrug in a 3-piece suit. The scar over his eye moved. It isn't a shrug. Then tell me who typed the query. No. Tell me whether he asked for it. Min-jae's mouth opened. It stayed open a quarter second too long, and then it closed, and a man who had spent 19 years being the quietest thing in every room he entered stood in a marble lobby and swallowed. Ms. Bennett, he said, if I answer that question in this lobby, I answer it badly. Then answer it badly. No. Gloria stepped in half a pace. Baby, he's not the one lying to you. Naomi looked at him, really looked, the way she looked at a mount under raking light, hunting the seam. And there it was, right there, a flat, pale scar and a man who wouldn't meet a question. You've got to tell, she said softly. Min-jae's hand went to the reel at his hip again and stopped halfway. Naomi put the folded pages into her jacket pocket, next to a phone with 4 photographs on it that she had still never zoomed in on. Then she picked up her box and walked past him and stopped at the concierge desk. The concierge, 30s, blazer, name tag she'd never read, straightened up like she was a delivery. Naomi shifted the box onto her hip. She took the black card out of her jeans with 2 fingers. She held it a second, and Min-jae, 4 feet behind her, saw it. And every muscle in his face rearranged. Ms. Bennett, he said, don't. She set it on the marble, face down, and slid it across the desk with 1 fingertip. Give this back to the man in the penthouse, she said. The concierge looked at the card, and then at Min-jae, and then at nothing. Tell him I decided. She walked to the doors. Gloria got there first, and shouldered one open into the rain. And the noise of East 61st came in, tires on wet asphalt, a horn, the whole indifferent city, and Naomi Bennett carried 2 boxes out of a building she'd never been able to afford, at 11:26 on a Monday morning, with no job, no lease, no address, and a printout in her jacket that said a stranger had known her name for 8 months. Behind her, at the desk, Park Min-jae picked up the black card. He held it in his palm, and he looked at the doors swinging shut. And he thought about a yellowed piece of tape in a brass-framed case, and the phone in his own pocket buzzed once against his thigh with a number that reached 4 living people. He let it buzz. Naomi put $4 on the counter of a diner on Roosevelt Avenue and asked for the booth by the window, because the booth by the window had an outlet. 5 weeks on Gloria's futon. 5 weeks of a radiator that knocked like a man asking to be let in. She had sent out 31 applications and gotten 2 replies, both of them the same sentence with a different letterhead. Her phone had 11% of a battery and 6 weeks of photographs on it. The train went over. The whole room shook and nobody in it looked up. She plugged in. She opened the folder, looking for anything in her own hands that was not a man's building. A man's cameras. A man's file with her name in it. So she went back to the beginning. To the first 4. Straight on, raking left, raking right, and the 4th, the wide one. The one she had framed to hold the damage and the accession tag in the same rectangle, because a crease without a number is a rumor. The celadon case sat in the corner of that frame, a smear of light. 8 months of dust behind glass. 3 pieces queued for a mount job nobody ever authorized, and she had photographed them by accident because she was doing her job correctly. Glass is a mirror when the room is darker than what's in front of it. Naomi put 2 fingers on the screen and pulled them apart. The waitress came. Naomi said coffee without hearing herself say it. She pulled again. The image went soft, then grainy, then it broke into squares. And inside the squares there was a shape that had been sitting in her pocket through a firing, an eviction, and a rainstorm. The lab's fire door. 4 levels down, the heavy one, the one that shuts itself, the one that has no card reader on the stair side, because a fire door is not a door, it is an exit. It was open, propped, standing 11 or 12 inches off the jamb, and the thing holding it was not a wedge and was not a chair. It was a hand. Naomi's coffee arrived. She let it sit. Cream knit sleeve, a cuff, a wrist, and above the wrist, sitting in the smear like a row of little moons, a strand of large freshwater pearls. She had been in the room. Carol Brennan had come down in the freight elevator with Dennis Kovalik at 4:40 in the morning, had called Naomi the night girl, had stood there with her phone in her hand for 11 minutes, and 11 minutes before that. She had walked down 4 flights of stairs and put her body against a fire door and held it, so that a man who came up from the garage could walk into a basement that logs 1 card at a time. Carol didn't badge Kovalik in. Carol didn't tell Ray to skip the log because she was being sloppy. Carol went down the stairs first. Naomi sat very still with her hands flat on the table on either side of the phone, the way she used to lay her hands on either side of a mount before touching it, and she counted the things this fixed. Who edited 7 weights clean at the gram? Who had the administrator password? Who pulled memo 4471 at 8:41 in the morning, 3 minutes after Naomi walked into that office, before a single word was said about a card reader? Because a memo about weights is not dangerous to a broker who can't read the column. It's only dangerous to the person who taught him it existed, who read her lines like lines, who put her own phone face down on the desk before she spoke, screen black, hands clean. Kovalik chose the lab because it had 1 witness. He knew it had 1 witness because somebody who worked there told him. The word for what she was looking at was not corruption, it was authorship. Naomi took a screenshot of the Zoom. She kept it. Gloria's rule had held for 6 weeks and it held now. The second it goes out, it's a complaint. Right now, it is a record. And then she understood the last cruelty of the man in the doorway with the new white badge on his hip. You'll want to keep the photos. Everybody keeps the photos. It's the healthy thing. He had said it as a kindness, in a volume built for 1 listener, and he had meant it. And it was the only true sentence in that office. And he had been wrong about exactly 1 thing. He thought the photos were a souvenir. Ms. Bennett. Park Min-jae stood at the end of the booth in a fully buttoned charcoal 3-piece suit, in a diner under an elevated train, with his hands where she could see them. She didn't cover the phone. She turned it face down anyway, slow, and left her palm on it. 60 seconds, she said. You get less every time. He sat down across from her without asking, which was the first thing he had ever done that she respected. You returned the card, he said. I did. I have not given it to him. That's not my problem. No. He looked at the coffee she hadn't touched. It's mine. The train came over. He waited it out. She watched the flat, pale scar that split his right eyebrow, and she remembered a lobby, and she remembered saying, You've got to tell, and she watched the scar do it. You came to Queens, she said. You badged into a foundation for 3 years, Min-jae said. You have used the same card at the same bodega on 47th for 5 weeks. Finding you was not the difficult part of my morning. Then say the difficult part. He took his glasses off. He set them on the table, folded. Without them, his eyes were small and old and had no place to go. The number on the emergency board, he said, was never the building's. Naomi's hand came off the phone. Building management is a company, he said. It has a 5-digit extension and a laminated sheet with a fire marshal on it and a water shutoff. That sheet is correct. Everything on that sheet is correct. He turned his glasses a quarter turn on the formica and then stopped himself doing it. The card under the sheet is not on the sheet. Who put it there? I did. She sat back against the vinyl. 8 months ago, he said. In March. 2 men walked the Hallowell on a Tuesday. The loading dock, the North Bank, the stair returns, the residential floors. They were photographing sightlines. They were not good at it. They were not meant to be good at it. They were meant to be finished by 4. He said it the way a man reads a weather report at the funeral of somebody he killed. I ran them. They worked for an acquisitions consultant on the east side. I flagged 3 floors as exposed. 34 was the first one on my list. Because of the Singapore unit. Because of you. He put his glasses back on. A woman living in a unit with no lease. No lease means no legal footprint. No legal footprint means when she disappears, nobody has to file anything. There is no landlord, there is no broker, there is a handshake and an email chain to a man who does not answer on weekends. He said the last part flat, and she heard him quoting her own arithmetic back at her, and she had never told him her arithmetic. You were the softest thing in the building, Ms. Bennett, and you kept honest hours. And you came home at 6 every morning through a door I cannot lock. So you watched my floor. I pulled the North Bank archive on your floor for 8 months. 90-minute window. Every entry logged to the penthouse terminal, because that is the only terminal I use. He held her eyes. The printout I gave you in the lobby. I typed the query. Every line of it. He never asked me for one of them. He said he knew who was in 34B, Naomi said. He did know. He knew because I told him once, 8 months ago, in a sentence, and then I never brought it up again. Min Jae's jaw moved. He asked me twice that spring whether the exposure had been closed. I said yes. Was it? No. Naomi put both hands around the cold coffee. There were 3 ways to close it, he said. Move you, buy the unit, or knock on the door and say, Ma'am, my employer owns this building. A man is measuring your floor. Please let us install a camera and a lock, at our cost, tonight. And you did which one? I wrote a phone number on an index card. He looked at his own hands, in black ink, on a Tuesday, and I taped it inside a brass case in the lobby under a laminated sheet, 6 inches off the floor, where a person only looks if she is already frightened. Naomi didn't move. If they came for you, Min Jae said, and if you got out of the apartment, and if you got to the lobby, and if you happened to be the kind of woman who reads a fire notice, you would find a number with no name on it, and you would call it, and it would ring in a room 19 floors above your ceiling. You built a rescue that required me to be lucky. I built a rescue that required me to say nothing. He didn't flinch from it. That was the point. That was the entire design. A card costs nothing. A conversation costs a man like me his answer. Which was yes. Which was yes. His scar moved once. 19 years, Miss Bennett. I have told that man the truth about money, about soul, about men who wanted him dead. I lied to him about a piece of tape. Then Friday, Naomi said. Then Friday, you ordered a pizza. To Gloria. To a card I taped up in March, which you photographed and saved under the name of the only friend you have. He said it without any music in it. The wrong number was never wrong, Miss Bennett. It was mine. You dialed the one door I built for you, and you dialed it 8 months early, over a pizza, for a woman in Queens whose phone company had made an error. Naomi looked out the window at Roosevelt Avenue and the steel over it. I read the message before he did. Min Jae said, I knew what it meant in half a second, and I stood 4 feet behind him and I said, wrong number. You lied twice. I lied for 19 years worth of the same reason. He unfolded his hands. I could not say to him, Sir, that woman's floor has been a target since March, and I never fixed it. And I taped your private line inside a glass case like a coward, so that if they took her, at least the noise would come to us. There is no version of that sentence that I survive saying. So you let a man go downstairs blind. I told him not to go. Min Jae almost smiled, and it did not fit his face. He went. Naomi turned the phone back over. She did not open it. Why are you telling me? Because in the lobby you took a printout out of my hand and you read it as surveillance. He said it evenly. It is not surveillance. It is the incident report of a man who failed you. He did not watch you into his life, Miss Bennett. He was told once, 8 months ago, that a woman on 34 was in the way. And every line on that paper is mine. Naomi looked at the little scar and the cheap glasses and the master keycard sitting on its steel reel at his hip and thought about the shape of what she had been carrying in her coat pocket for 5 weeks, like it was a knife pointed at her. You could have knocked, she said. Yes, Min Jae said. That is the only true thing in the entire file. She let that sit until the next train. Then she pushed the phone across the formica, face up, on the Zoom. Min-jae looked at the hand on the fire door for a long time. He looked at the pearls. He didn't ask whose they were, and that told her he already knew what a hand on a propped door means in a building with one card reader. "Sir," he said quietly, to nobody. "Don't call him," Naomi said. "Ms. Bennett, don't call him." She pulled the phone back. "If that man makes one phone call about this, that stops being a photograph and becomes a favor. And a favor is a receipt. I've spent 6 weeks learning that the only thing anybody can't take off my record is my name on it." Min-jae sat with his mouth open half an inch and closed it. "He would want to help you." "I know," Naomi said. "That's why I'm not going to let him." She unplugged her phone at 19% and put $4 more on the table for coffee she never drank. A liar. She went to the Manhattan District Attorney's office on a Thursday, alone, in a blazer she borrowed from a 52-year-old woman and had to roll at the cuffs. She brought her own phone. She did not bring a lawyer because she did not have one, and she did not bring a man because she had one available and left him 19 floors above a lobby. She sat in a room with 2 assistant district attorneys and an investigator who had never heard the word kozo, and she taught them the column. She taught them that paper drinks the room, that every object gets weighed out and weighed in, that a registrar in 1974 started a buckram ledger in ink, and that ink does not edit. 7 objects, 8 months, an album leaf out at 481 grams and back at 478. April, 462 and 459. 3 grams, 7 times. Across a screen panel and 2 hanging scrolls and 3 lengths of paper mounted on silk, objects with nothing in common except that 7 copies made from the same stock, at the same dimensions, with the same paste, weigh the same. "How much is 3 grams? The investigator said. "A postage stamp," Naomi said. "It's the only honest thing in the building." She gave them the 7 spreads. She gave them the frame she had shot with the database on screen and the ledger page beside it. Clean number, true number, 1 rectangle. She gave them the D, Kovalik in ink, 7 times, hooked D, scratched K, authorizing loans of 19th century Korean paper to facilities that used initials for names. Then she gave them the 4th photograph, the crease, the accession tag. And in the corner, in the glass of a case holding 3 celadon pieces that had been waiting 8 months for a mount job, a fire door propped 11 inches and a hand on it wearing a strand of pearls. "Time stamp," the ADA said. 4:41 a.m., Naomi said. "The condition report went in at 4:47, under my name. It's still in their system, unless somebody withdrew it." She put a fingertip on the table. Memo 4471 was withdrawn by an administrator at 8:41. There are 4 people with that access. Ask them which one was standing in a doorway at 8:38 reading a sentence she'd written down the night before. They took the phone for imaging. They gave her a receipt. She signed the affidavit with her whole name and her aunt's spelling of it in her own hand, and she did not shake. Carol Brennan was placed on administrative leave on a Monday and resigned on the Wednesday, and by the following Tuesday, she had a lawyer sitting beside her and a proffer letter on the table, because a woman who has never been arrested will trade an art broker for a Sunday in her own kitchen. She gave them Kovalik's buyers. She gave them the Geneva unit number. She gave them the 8 months. The channel through the Freeport died the day her testimony was docketed, a bonded unit under a lease under a holding company under a name that has never once been read aloud in a courtroom, because the woman who could have named it never asked anybody upstairs for anything. Nobody subpoenaed a shelf. Nobody knew there was a shelf. Dennis Kovalik was arrested at a gate at Newark with a burgundy portfolio under his arm and, according to the agent who cuffed him, twisted his watch a quarter turn and said he'd been under considerable stress. The Cheon scroll came out of the humidification chamber 11 days late, cockled through the upper third, and the foundation paid a conservator in Boston $9,000 to do badly what a woman 4 levels down had been doing for $61,000 a year. Nobody offered Naomi her job back. She took a contract position at a small library in Long Island City, 3 days a week, $18 an hour more than the last place, and she made the first payment against $88,000 from a futon in Sunnyside. And then she moved 11 blocks to a walk-up with a radiator that worked and a lock she chose herself. 6 weeks later, on a Friday, somebody knocked on the door of a 4th-floor walk-up with no doorman, no concierge desk, and no camera in the hall. 2 knocks, spaced, in no hurry. Naomi was barefoot in the sapphire robe, and there was nobody in the world who was supposed to be at that door. She opened it. Seo Tae-hyun filled the frame in a hallway that smelled like somebody else's onions. Sleeves folded back, collar open, the koi running up out of his shirt into the light where anybody on the landing could see it. His shoes had been on the street. He had climbed 4 flights. He was holding 1 pizza box. "You're a long way from your building," Naomi said. "I don't own anything on this street," he said. "I know." She held the door. "That's why you're standing in the hallway." He didn't lean on the jamb. He stood square, and for the first time since a Friday in September, the man had nothing in his hands but food. "I came to tell you the truth," he said. "All of it, before you decide anything. Min-jae already told me. Min-jae told you his half." His jaw set. "He's been my second for 19 years. He put a card in a glass box because he was afraid of me, and I have spent 6 weeks understanding that a man is only afraid of me because I made him that way." He breathed once. "That's mine, not his." "Is he gone?" he offered. Tae-hyun's mouth moved a half degree. "I told him he doesn't get to leave. He gets to knock on doors now. Every one of them." Naomi didn't move out of the doorway. "I knew your name in March," he said. "I did nothing with it. I let it sit on a list for 8 months, because a name on a list costs nothing, and a knock costs something. And then you texted the wrong number, and I came down 19 floors in 9 minutes, and sat on your floor, and let you tell me how many days you had left." His voice stayed level, and something under it did not. "I priced the pizza. I've never been so ashamed of a sentence in my life. You didn't offer me money. No. That's the only reason you got in the door." "I know," he said. "It was also cowardice with better manners." Naomi looked at him. "Sang-hoon bought 16 pizzas," she said. Tae-hyun's eyes closed for 1 second. 15 went to the service elevator. He ate 2. He's been apologizing for months." "To who?" "Miguel." She laughed. "The real one. From the stomach. The one that had been out of the building for a year." And the sound of it did something to the man's shoulders that nothing else had ever done. "You never asked me for one thing," he said. "Not the card, not the lawyer, not the name in Geneva. You had it. You could have burned me with it in that office and walked out with a settlement." "I didn't have it," Naomi said. "You gave it to me. There's a difference, and it's the whole difference. You went to the DA alone. I went to the DA with my own phone and my own name." She lifted her chin. "It's a record. Nobody's administrator can withdraw it." He held out the box. She looked at it. Then at the tattoo. Then at his hand, which was not steady. Which had not been steady since the 2nd flight of stairs. Naomi took the box, set it on the floor of her own apartment, in her own building, on a lease with her name on it, and straightened up and closed her fist in midnight charcoal cotton at his open collar and pulled. He came down. He came down like a building. She kissed him breathless in a hallway that belonged to neither of them, one hand fisted in his shirt and the other flat on the koi, and his hand came up and shook at her jaw and stayed there, and neither of them said anything for a long time because there was nothing left in the file. When she let him go, he stayed exactly where she put him. 8 months, Naomi said. "You watched me for 8 months. Yes? Now stand there and let me look at you." Every Friday after that, a man who owns half of East 61st Street sits barefoot on the floor of a 4th-floor walk-up with his back against a second-hand couch and a cardboard box open on the rug between them, turned so the cut side faces her. It's the only room he was ever invited into. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Tell me, K-Fam, have you ever done the careful, invisible work while somebody upstairs called you the night girl? Have you ever held the proof in your own phone for 6 weeks and never looked hard enough to see it? And who in your life is guarding you quietly without ever having the courage to knock? Mark my words, K-Fam. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, truth, and courage, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.